Hey everyone, and welcome back. Are you ready for another deep dive?
Always excited to dive into a new topic.
Well, today we're tackling a figure who needs no introduction, Genghis Khan.
Ah, Genghis Khan.
But we're going beyond the usual, ruthless conqueror stuff.
Right. There's so much more to him than that.
Exactly. And we're using his Wikipedia page as our starting point, believe it or not.
Sounds like a good place to start. It's a surprisingly detailed resource.
It really is. So get ready for some surprising facts, some different perspectives on his legacy, and hopefully we'll start to understand why he's still such a captivating figure all these centuries later.
I think we can definitely do that.
All right, first off, the mystery of his birth year. Wikipedia gives us three options: 1155, 1162, or 1167. What do you make of that?
Well, it just goes to show you how history can be a little fuzzy around the edges sometimes.
Especially when you're talking about someone from so long ago, right?
Yeah, exactly. Each date has its own set of historians backing it up, but I think most scholars these days lean towards 1162. But you know what I find most fascinating?
What's that?
Even something as basic as when someone was born can be debated centuries later. I mean, it really makes you wonder about the accuracy of some of the other details we think we know about the past.
It really does make you think.
It does.
And speaking of things that make you think, how about that legend of Genghis Khan being born clutching a blood clot?
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
It sounds like something straight out of a movie.
It does, doesn't it? But there's more to it than just a cool visual.
Oh, I bet.
That blood clot, it's a recurring symbol in Asian folklore, often connected to a warrior's destiny.
I never knew that.
It's almost like the storytellers were hinting at the power this baby had inside him, setting the stage for his future conquests. You have to wonder how much that legend influenced how people saw Genghis Khan, even during his lifetime.
It definitely adds to the mystique.
For sure.
But before he was the mighty Khan, his life was anything but easy. He was born Temujin, and those early years were marked by, well, some pretty serious hardship.
That's right. After his father was killed, his family was actually abandoned by their tribe.
Wow.
Can you imagine being cast out like that, forced to live as hunter-gatherers just to survive? It says a lot about Temujin and his mother's resilience, their ability to overcome those early challenges.
Absolutely.
But it also begs the question, did those hardships forge the determination and maybe even, let's be honest, the ruthlessness he would display later on?
It's hard to say for sure, but it definitely makes you think about the connection between adversity and ambition.
It does.
And then, of course, there's the incident with his half-brother, Better.
Yeah.
A pretty dark event that some historical accounts kind of gloss over.
Yeah, some definitely leave it out completely.
But the secret history of the Mongols, they don't shy away from it at all.
Nope, it's right there in detail.
It describes Temujin, even as a young man, taking decisive action to secure his position, shall we say.
You could say that. So was this early act of violence a sign of the brutality that was to come? Or was it just, a desperate act of survival in a kill-or-be-killed world?
I mean, it's impossible to know for sure, right?
Yeah.
But it certainly adds another layer to his character.
Absolutely. It's a great example of how history is rarely simple or straightforward.
It's full of those gray areas, those moral dilemmas that make you really think about human nature.
Exactly, and that's what makes history so fascinating to study.
Couldn't agree more. But before we get too deep into those moral dilemmas, there's one more event from Temujin's early life that I think we should touch on. His blood brother pact, the Endan, with Jamuka.
Ah, yes.
It's such a key moment, and their relationship just seems like, foreshadowing for some serious drama down the line.
Oh, absolutely. Blood brother oaths were huge among the Mongols, It signified a bond even deeper than family.
Wow.
But in this case, it ends up setting the stage for this epic clash of loyalty and ambition. It's almost like a Shakespearean tragedy playing out on the Mongolian steppe.
Now that's an image.
Right.
But even before their big falling out, Temujin shows he's got this, strategic mind, even as a teenager. That story about the stolen sable cloak is a perfect example.
Oh, yeah, that's a classic.
Instead of keeping this luxurious gift for himself, he decides to give it to Togrul, the Khan of the powerful Keret tribe.
Smart move.
It wasn't just a random act of generosity, was it?
Not at all. Temujin understood that an alliance with Togrul was worth way more than a fancy cloak. He was already thinking about the big picture, even at that young age.
A master of playing the long game.
Exactly. And that's a skill that would serve him well throughout his life.
Speaking of long games, let's talk about the kidnapping of his wife Berta and the questions surrounding his eldest son Jochi's paternity. Now, this adds a whole other layer of intrigue, doesn't it?
Oh, definitely.
Because it highlights the importance of lineage and reputation, even in a world that seems to be ruled by brute force. Berta's kidnapping by the Merkits, her pregnancy when she returned. I mean, Temujin chose to raise Jochi as his own, but the rumors persisted. It's interesting to compare how the official chronicles downplay it all, while the secret history is much more upfront about it.
It's true.
It really shows how image and historical narratives have always been carefully managed, often hiding those inconvenient truths.
Yeah, we see that even today.
Exactly. And imagine the impact this had on Jochi,
Yeah.
living his whole life with this cloud of doubt hanging over him. It's not just a personal drama either. Some historians believe this whole uncertainty over his lineage actually contributed to some of those power struggles that happened within the Mongol Empire later on.
That's a very good point.
So much to unpack there. And before Temujin fully consolidates his power, he experiences both victories and setbacks.
Right.
The Battle of Dallin Beljid is a great example. Historians can't even agree on whether he won or lost.
Yeah, the sources are all over the place on that one.
It's almost as if they're describing totally different battles. But it is intriguing to consider that it might have been a strategic retreat on Temujin's part.
A way to regroup, reassess, learn from his mistakes.
Exactly. Remember, he was facing the mighty Jin dynasty at this point.
Right.
This might have been his first real taste of large-scale warfare. And that could have been a crucial learning experience, one that would pave the way for his later successes.
You know what? I think you're right. He was always learning, always adapting. And that's one of the things that made him such a formidable leader.
He never let a setback keep him down for long.
Never.
But before he takes on the Jin dynasty, there's the little matter of the shaman, Kokachu, to deal with.
Kokaji.
His attempted coup almost unravels everything Temujin had worked for.
He was a serious threat. He used his spiritual authority to influence people, even challenged Temujin's family directly.
That was a bold move.
It really was. And it shows that political power isn't just about military might, you know? It's about controlling the narrative, influencing people's beliefs.
It's about winning hearts and minds as much as territory.
Exactly.
Luckily for Temujin, he manages to outmaneuver Kokachu, solidifying his position as both a political AD, a spiritual leader. Talk about a close call.
Definitely a turning point.
And perfect timing, too, because the year 1206 marks a huge moment in his life. At a grand assembly called a Kurultai, Temujin is given a new title, one that will echo throughout history.
Here it comes.
Genghis Khan.
A name that still inspires awe and fear centuries later.
But even the meaning of that title is up for debate.
You're telling me.
Some say it means strength or righteousness. Others connect it to the word for ocean, implying a ruler with vast dominion.
You know, it's fascinating how the origin of this title, the one that would be used for centuries after, can tell us so much about Mongol culture and beliefs at that time.
It really adds another layer to our understanding of him. Genghis Khan, ruler of the vast ocean of the steppes.
That's a great way to put it.
And with that new title comes a wave of reforms that completely reshaped Mongol society.
Absolutely.
These reforms, they were revolutionary.
They were. Genghis Khan, he understood that the old tribal system wouldn't cut it for the empire he was building. He needed structure. He needed loyalty, not just to individual tribes, but to him, the Khan.
And he wasn't afraid to shake things up. He brings in a decimal system for his army, breaks down those tribal loyalties that had always defined Mongol society, and starts rewarding people based on merit, no matter their background.
And that merit-based system, along with his brilliant military organization, those were key to his success. I mean, it's incredible to compare his strategies to other empires that tried and failed to control such vast territories.
And his reforms had a lasting impact, didn't they? The fact that Mongol dynasties ruled for centuries, even Timur needing to claim descent from Genghis Khan to legitimize his own rule, that shows just how influential those changes were.
No doubt about it.
It's like he created a blueprint for building and managing a vast, diverse empire. And leaders for generations to come would study his methods, trying to replicate his success.
It's true.
But he wasn't just a social reformer, right? He was a military genius. And let's not forget the Kishig, his elite bodyguard. These guys, they were much more than just muscle.
Oh, yeah. The Kishig was like his inner circle. They served as his personal staff, a training ground for future leaders, maybe even a way to keep potential rivals close by. You know, keep your friends close and your enemies closer.
It was a brilliant system of trust and control.
Exactly. Can you imagine being part of that inner circle, you know? Witnessing Genghis Khan's decision-making firsthand, that would have been a masterclass in leadership and strategy.
I'd love to have a fly-on-the-wall view of those meetings. But even Genghis Khan, for all his brilliance, faced setbacks.
Right.
His campaign against the Western Shia kingdom, for example, didn't go exactly as planned.
It's true, he wasn't invincible.
Like that incident with the dam, where his attempt to flood a city completely backfired.
It just goes to show you that even the greatest leaders have to adapt, They make mistakes, learn from them, and keep moving forward.
It also shows that he's a man of action, willing to take risks.
Sometimes those risks paid off, and sometimes they didn't.
It's what makes it so fascinating.
Yeah.
He was a complex figure, full of contradictions.
Absolutely.
So he's unifying the Mongols, reforming their society, and starting to expand his influence.
Right.
Things are about to get a whole lot bigger, though, because on the horizon, the Khwarezmian Empire.
Now things are getting really interesting.
That's where Genghis Khan, the conqueror, really steps onto the world stage.
And the world will never be the same.
All right, so last time we left off with Genghis Khan, he's got the Mongols unified, he's reformed their society, he's starting to expand his influence. But now we're getting to the Khwarezmian Empire. This is where things really get interesting, right?
Absolutely. This is where Genghis Khan the Conqueror really takes center stage.
This Khwarezmian War, it's a turning point, not just in his life, but in world history too. But before we get to all the battles and conquests, I think it's worth asking, what led to this conflict in the first place? It all seems to start with this, well, seemingly minor incident, a massacred caravan.
Yeah, a massacred caravan. You'd think something like that could be, smoothed over with a little diplomacy.
Especially since Genghis Khan had already sent envoys to the Shah, trying to establish peaceful trade. What happened?
Well, see, this caravan, it wasn't just a few merchants. It was carrying Mongol envoys. They represented Genghis Khan himself.
Oh, I see.
So when Inalchuq, the governor of Otrar, he decided to destroy the caravan, kill everyone.
That's a big statement.
It was a huge insult, a direct challenge to the Khan's authority.
So it became more than just a trade dispute then. It was about honor, reputation.
Exactly. Genghis Khan, he'd built his reputation on responding swiftly and brutally to any threat to his power. Ignoring this, well, it would have made him look weak.
Yeah, I can see how letting that slide would have sent the wrong message to, well, anyone who might be thinking of challenging him.
Exactly. He had rivals both inside and outside his empire. He couldn't let them think he was going soft.
But still, to go to war against an empire as powerful as Khwarezm over this, it seems almost disproportionate, doesn't it?
Well, we have to remember, for the Mongols, hospitality and protecting envoys, those were sacred duties. Breaking those customs, that was a serious offense, almost an act of war in itself.
So Genghis Khan's fury, it wasn't just personal. It was rooted in these deep cultural values.
Exactly. Attacking Khwarezm, it wasn't just about revenge. It was about upholding these values. It was about showing everyone, both within his empire and beyond, that he was serious about protecting those under his rule.
Wow. It's amazing how something that seems so minor to us could have such massive repercussions back then. So 1219, the Mongol war machine sets its sights on Khwarezm. What can you tell us about this campaign? Did the Shah's forces put up much of a fight?
Oh, they fought back, they did. But they were totally unprepared for what Genghis Khan brought to the table.
Yeah, what was it about the Mongol army that made them so effective?
The speed, the coordination, the sheer ruthlessness of it all. It was unlike anything they'd ever seen.
I bet.
Key cities like Bukhara and Samarkand, they fell pretty quickly. The Shah, he was completely overwhelmed. He ended up fleeing his own capital.
I bet that didn't sit well with Genghis Khan. It seems like the kind of guy who relished a good face-to-face confrontation, Imagine if those two had actually met on the battlefield. That would have been legendary.
Oh, for sure. But fleeing, it actually makes sense. Trying to hold territory against the Mongols, it was almost impossible. Their tactics were based on mobility, Overwhelming force. They could cover these vast distances, live off the land, and then strike with incredible speed and precision. Trying to fight them head-on in a traditional battle, well, that was basically suicide.
Speaking of speed and precision, what about that legendary Great Raid, led by Jebi and Subutai? Didn't they basically do a lap around the Caspian Sea, fighting battles and gathering intel as they went?
Oh, the Great Raid. One of the most audacious military maneuvers in history, imagine that. Riding thousands of miles through enemy territory, engaging multiple armies, and then coming back with all this intel on how to defeat them. It was a masterpiece of reconnaissance and psychological warfare. I mean, they even ventured as far west as Georgia and Kievan Rus. That was the first direct contact between the Mongols and, well, European powers.
Talk about a long-distance scouting mission.
Yeah.
Genghis Khan, he really had a knack for picking the right people for the job.
Oh, absolutely. Jebi, Subutai, these weren't just warriors, they were brilliant strategists in their own right.
Yeah.
And Genghis Khan, he knew it. He surrounded himself with talented individuals, recognizing their strengths, and then giving them the freedom to operate independently. It was a key part of his success. It was a true meritocracy.
Yeah, he rewarded those who proved themselves capable, regardless of their background.
Right. So back to the Khwarezmian War. The Shah's on the run, his cities are falling. What's Genghis Khan's next move?
Does he just mop up the remaining resistance and call it a day?
Not quite. Remember Inelchuk, the governor who started all this?
Oh yeah, the caravan guy.
Genghis Khan, he made it his personal mission to capture that guy and make an example of him. The siege of Otrar, it was brutal. Lasted for 5 months.
5 months? That's longer than some wars today.
Exactly. It shows you how determined he was. It wasn't just about conquering territory, it was about sending a message.
No one messes with Genghis Khan.
Exactly. And Otrar wasn't the only city to face his wrath. The siege and destruction of Urgench, for example, was particularly brutal. Countless civilians were killed.
It's hard to reconcile the military genius with that level of destruction. Was this just how wars were fought back then, or was there something uniquely brutal about the Mongols?
It's a question historians still debate today. I mean, brutal sieges and massacres, they were sadly pretty common in that era. But the scale and the efficiency of the Mongol conquests, that was something new. Some argue it was a deliberate strategy of terror. Break your enemy's spirit before you even engage them in battle. Others say it was just the result of a warrior culture clashing with more settled civilizations.
A clash of cultures. The fog of war. It's easy to judge from our modern perspective. It's important to try to understand the context. But what about the Shah? Does Genghis Khan ever catch up to him? Get his revenge?
Well, the Shah actually dies on an island in the Caspian Sea. Not from a Mongol sword, but from illness.
Oh, wow. Talk about anticlimactic.
It is. But the war didn't end there. The Shah's son, Jalal al-Din Mingburnu, he took up the mantle of resistance. He was a capable leader, fierce warrior. He actually managed to inflict a few defeats on the Mongols, became a symbol of defiance against them.
So the war dragged on. But what about Genghis Khan? He was getting up there in years, wasn't he? Did this mark the end of his campaigns?
Not quite. He still had some unfinished business to attend to. Remember the Western Shia, the ones who defied him earlier?
Oh, yeah.
Their rebellion? That became the focus of his final campaign. And a fateful one it was.
Sounds like this deep dive is about to get even deeper.
It is. We'll explore that final chapter and the legacy Genghis Khan left behind when we come back.
All right, we're back for the final part of our deep dive into Genghis Khan. And things are about to get pretty intense. Last time, we left off with the Khwarezmian Empire in ruins and a new challenger emerging in the east, the Western Shia.
It's interesting, isn't it? You'd think after conquering an empire that stretched, from the Pacific all the way to the Caspian Sea, Genghis Khan might want to take a break. But this campaign against the Western Shia, this wasn't just about adding more territory.
It was personal.
Exactly. Remember, they defied him before, refused to send troops for his Khwarezmian campaign. For Genghis Khan, this wasn't just disobedience. It was a direct challenge to his authority, a threat to the stability of everything he'd built.
And even though he was getting up there in years, he couldn't just let that stand.
Nope. In 1226, despite his age, his declining health, he launches this final campaign. And it's a whirlwind, a devastating show of force that ultimately consumes, well, both the Western Shia and Genghis Khan himself.
He definitely went out with a bang. But
Yeah.
why the Western Shia? He had this massive empire. Why not focus on, solidifying his gains, enjoying the spoils of victory?
Oh, Genghis Khan, he was obsessed with order, loyalty. The Western Shia's defiance was like a loose thread, It could unravel the entire tapestry of his empire. He had to demonstrate that rebellion, no matter how small, would be met with swift and absolute retribution.
A lesson for any potential challengers out there?
Huh.
But how did this final campaign actually play out? I mean, did the Western Shia even stand a chance?
Not really. Even in his later years, Genghis Khan was still a brilliant strategist. He leads his forces with this calculated fury, dismantling their defenses, taking city after city.
Were there any battles or sieges that really stand out from this campaign?
Well, the Siege of Karakoto is a good example. It was a strategically vital city on the, western edge of the Western Shia. Capturing it, opened the path for the Mongols to push deeper into enemy territory. And as always, the Mongols' mastery of siege warfare was on full display.
It must have been terrifying being on the receiving end of a Mongol siege, right?
Oh, absolutely. Knowing that no matter how strong your walls are, they will find a way to break through.
It makes you wonder how much of their success was psychological.
Psychological warfare, it was a key part of their strategy. The Mongols wanted their enemies to be so terrified that they'd just surrender before the first arrow was even fired.
Makes sense, right? Save you a lot of time and resources in the long run. But it wasn't all brute force, was it? Genghis Khan, he wasn't above using diplomacy when it suited him.
You're right. Alongside the military campaign, he offered terms of surrender to those who submitted willingly. It was a classic carrot and stick approach, you know? Brutal force combined with strategic offers of leniency. He understood that conquering and holding such a vast empire, well, it required more than just military might.
He had to be pragmatic, make it seem like joining his empire was the better option.
Exactly. But we can't ignore the darker side of this campaign. The Mongol armies, they were notoriously brutal, and the Western Shia campaign, it was no exception.
Unfortunately, you're right. There were widespread massacres, cities were razed, the civilian population suffered immensely.
It's a stark reminder of the human cost of Genghis Khan's ambition, a dark stain on his legacy.
It's a reminder that history is never black and white, isn't it? Even the most successful leaders, well, they often leave a trail of destruction in their wake.
It's a difficult truth to confront. I mean, Genghis Khan, he was a brilliant military strategist, a skilled administrator, a unifier who brought stability to much of Eurasia. But he was also responsible for immense suffering. It's a legacy that, well, it continues to be debated today.
And speaking of legacies, let's talk about Genghis Khan's death. We know he died during this Western Shia campaign, but the exact circumstances are still a mystery. What are some of the theories out there?
Well, the official accounts, they're pretty vague. They give us a few different possibilities. Some say it was an illness, maybe malaria. Others mention a riding accident, maybe a wound he received in battle.
Of course, you can't forget those more dramatic rumors.
Oh, right.
The story of the beautiful Gurbalchan, the captured wife of the Western Shi emperor, that one's a classic.
Ah, yes, the legend of the poisoned dagger.
Hmm.
It's a great story. It plays into that, fascination we have with Genghis Khan's personal life. And maybe there's a part of us that, I don't know, wants to see a bit of poetic justice in his demise.
It's interesting how these legends persist, even when we have the supposedly official accounts. It shows that people crave those dramatic narratives, those human elements, even when we're talking about historical figures.
Absolutely. We want our heroes and villains to be larger than life.
But whether it was a battle wound, a lingering illness, or a vengeful concubine, one thing's for sure. Genghis Khan's death was a pivotal moment in history. You have to wonder, what would happen if he'd lived longer? Would the Mongol Empire have expanded even further?
It's one of those what-if moments that we'll never know the answer to, but it's definitely fun to speculate. But the empire doesn't crumble after his death, does it?
It doesn't.
No. Genghis Khan, he was always one step ahead. He'd already chosen his successor, his third son, Ögedei.
And was he, like, a great warrior, a fierce conqueror like his father?
Well, he wasn't known for his military skills, but he was known for his diplomacy, his ability to, build consensus, and he had excellent administrative skills.
So it sounds like Genghis Khan, he understood that holding this vast, diverse empire together, it would take a different set of skills than those needed on the battlefield.
He knew what it would take to make his empire last.
So Ögedei takes over, but I imagine it wasn't easy. The Mongol Empire was huge, full of ambitious people who might have seen this as their chance to grab power.
Oh, there were definitely challenges. But Ögedei, with the support of his mother Berta and his brother Tolui, he manages to solidify his authority and continues his father's legacy of expansion.
And so the story continues.
It does.
From those humble beginnings on the steppes to becoming the leader of, well, the largest contiguous land empire in history, Genghis Khan's life was a whirlwind. Ambition, warfare, political maneuvering. I mean, this guy did it all.
And his impact is still felt today.
It is.
I mean, he reshaped the map of Eurasia. He influenced trade, culture, even the course of empires that came after him.
It's amazing to think about the impact one person can have on the world, isn't it? But why should we care about a warlord who lived 800 years ago? What can we learn from all this?
Well, I think Genghis Khan's story, for all its complexities, all its contradictions, it reminds us that history, it's made by individuals, but it's also shaped by forces larger than any single person. He was a product of his time, But he also helped shape the world we live in today.
And his story reminds us that leadership can take many forms. It shows us how ambition can drive both, well, great achievements and terrible destruction. And it reminds us that understanding the past, well, it's essential if we want to understand the present and maybe even shape the future.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the world of Genghis Khan. Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope you've enjoyed exploring the life and legacy of this complex, contradictory, and ultimately fascinating figure. And we hope it sparked your curiosity to learn even more about this amazing period in history. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep. Tell us what you think about this episode. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.